Morning, Jim.
Morning. Speaking about 25 feet. 2 years ago, we had that in December, and half of the dropping off the divide.
Morning. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Farley should be here in a little bit, but Marcy can't join us this morning. So I think we've got the quorum we need. So I'm going to go ahead and call us to order and ask if there's any public comment this morning. Seeing none, I'm going to move to approval of the April 2nd, 2024 minutes. Are there any comments or questions? Motion. Alan Delwich moves to approve. A second. Barb seconds. All those in favor say aye. No opposed. Okay. And financial reports.
Right.
And we have more than April. We have a whole bunch.
And you don't have April. You have March, January through March. And I'll just explain that because we have never received the treasurer's letter that you usually get in February that shows the property tax. And because of all the changes that occurred at the end of last year, the estimate that we have, I have no knowledge that that will be correct. But the treasurer have apparently changed systems or something, and they don't seem to be able to get those reports out. So until they do, everything we have is going to be drafts subject to revision, and we'll pay for the revisions when Holting makes them. So they were reluctant to actually provide me January through March because they said when we have to redo them, you'll have to pay for the revision. But because Mr. Council Member Shada seemed to be so concerned that we didn't have financials, I went ahead and asked that they produce these. So there's not much activity, as I reported last month. You can see at the end of March, we've collected $66,000 in property taxes. There's fairly minimal amounts, and I'm looking at page 3, I guess, minimal amounts of actual expenditures, a little bit in legal, obviously Jim's salary. The snow removal is one of the bigger ones. And we had at the end of March in the bank, $823,000. So I'd be happy to answer questions.
Any questions for Anne? Comments? Okay, a motion to accept the financial reports, the draft financial report. Should we go ahead and accept
Yeah.
them?
Yeah, subject to change. Yep.
Moved by John, second by Alan Gregory. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We're going to hear next from Carol about the website status.
So who runs I don't think I have access to be able to open it up. Is there somebody that has the ability to open up the website on the screen? Jim and I had talked about running through the website real quick. Oh, shoot. Can I go over there? Do you mind if I attempt it? I promise not to break the city.
Would you do us a favor, take that with you so people can hear you?
Yep,
Just-
absolutely. I'll take this and my notes. So as I walk over there, I will tell you we're about 98% of the way done. We would love to, one of the things we'd like to do today is take pictures of all the board members as well as a group photo. And we will add the board members and terms to the website. We are working on some videos. There's a couple videos on there that were done by the previous owner of the Dillon, videos with Corrine Toll in them. And so we want to update to talk about current status in the URA, talk about the great things, what the URA has done for the community. Jim had introduced me to Avik, but I've not been able to get anything back from him. So I have a feeling he either isn't interested in being on video or doesn't have anything we want to hear him say. And some people just don't like being on video. So let me see if I can access in here. I'm not locked. Oh, okay, perfect. If I do this. And then, yeah, looks like I can drive this bus. Is this okay? Do I need any security clearance or anything? Okay, cool. Okay, so this is the homepage. We haven't done, Jim and I have been going back and forth about copy changes and such. And so we have updated this video actually. We will update some of this at the time we did the original videos, there wasn't a lot of really cool stuff to say or show about the URA. So we kind of went to integrate it into Manitou, right? So that the funding from the URA would continue the cool vibe, the cool community of Manitou. So we can update some of this on this video. All right, here's my little doodah. So if you go down, some of the stuff has stayed the same. We included the letter slightly edited. Jim and I believe Jim probably worked with Debbie to update the letter that went in that piece that went in the bulletin last year to talk about what's been going on in the URA. These photos will get updated with the photos that we've been taking in the community, you know, the pollination station, the new art pieces, things like that. Community vision, again, update with some of the newer photos that talk about what's been happening in the URA as opposed to the photos for the traditional Manitou community. Link to the Manitou Urban Renewal Plan, the gateway, what's happening in the gateway. So it's a unique opportunity to invest in the property. Sorry, questions? Oh, thank you. That actually, the lovely woman back there, Marianne Zachary, is who took that. She's quite talented. We continue to have the resources. So going to the map where the growth gets shaped, guidance for the area, etc. So that's the home page. So really just updated to the latest. We changed, and I don't remember what this page was before, but we changed it to success stories. So this page, in my opinion, is the sweet spot. This video will get replaced as we create the new video. Because again, at the time we were interviewing mostly people within the traditional Manitou community, not the URA, because there wasn't a lot to talk about on this area. So we created milestones. So images of the La Fun, the Adams Mountain Cafe remodel and expansion, Pike Ride Station, Pollination Station. We need new visuals for that. And Barb, actually, well, while I have you sitting there, where is a good place to get some photos that might include actual greenery or bees, or is there someone I can connect with?
Maybe from the prior cycles with, who left us? Melody, but who left our area? Becca.
Oh,
I bet
okay.
I bet you Becca or Melody have some good photos.
Okay. I know Becca really well, so I'll reach out to the three of them to get
I mean,
photos.
she was very instrumental at our outset, so.
Okay, well, and even if there are photos that we can take, that was kind of the best we could do. And we knew it at the time based on weather and we weren't quite there yet.
I probably have one with my name on it or something, but that's not what I'm providing necessarily unless you're short.
And then the new Holiday Inn Express featuring the EV charging station, lots with art on the streets, the different art pieces along with descriptions, Becker's Lane improvements. And then, so we had more expanded milestones and success stories. Now, Jim, I know I can't see you, but the street trees at Ocano Lodge, when we went over there, I didn't see trees there. Are they not planted yet?
No, there are trees there. They're along the planting bed parallel to the street. There's not a lot. And I believe there's a couple of blue spruces that were planted, and then there are some deciduous trees.
Okay, we'll walk over there and see if we can take, probably what happened is we went over and didn't see anything that bowled us over. But now that you've said blue spruce, it'll give me something to look for.
Well, you might want to check, if you're going to talk to Melody anyway, she was kind of in charge of that, so she can tell you or maybe even show you.
Okay, that'll be good. Okay. Mary Ellen, and I don't know Mary Ellen. Melody, I think I've been on some emails with, so I can track her down. Montgomery. Okay. And then the pedestrian friendly sidewalks, holiday lighting installation. We were going to try and track some of those down from the social. Sorry. Stop. There we go. Holiday lighting installation, the light posts, and then the Sheldon's automotive facade upgrades. So we can work on adding some of those images. And I know that's a lot to run through. Is there anything anybody sees that we're missing in terms of imagery and such?
Even, I don't know if there's ever been a shot of sidewalk clearing, that we keep our sidewalks open in the winter or something. I mean, it's all part of the things we do. I mean, any of the little things that we maintain.
Okay. And we didn't talk about that. So when we did this, we really looked at it from kind of the marquee projects, but that's actually a good one. Are there other maintenance things that we should include? Because I don't know that I realized that some of what we did was, to your point, mundane but critical, right? For access to the corridor.
Yeah, well, Alan's favorite subject of lighting the streets.
Okay. Okay.
Alan could put a footnote on it.
Okay. I'll work on putting that together as kind of like almost even a collage of the maintenance and the ongoing. But yeah, we're pretty proud about this, and Jim gave us a great list to work with along with great bullet points, and it really helped inform what the pictures looked like. So
May I make one other comment?
absolutely.
This is all excellent. Thank you very much. If I were a developer, the one thing that I would want to know more about with some specificity that isn't in there anymore, or maybe never was, is the West Side Avenue project. And the fact that all the utilities have been upgraded. I mean, this is really not sexy. This is not maybe even picture worthy, but the fact that the whole West Side Avenue meant that all that infrastructure is new and you don't have to worry about it, I think is pretty critical.
Okay. It might need to. Okay. Okay. That is super doable. It's interesting because when this was originally created and maybe that, I forget, this isn't a touch screen. So like we have the invest page and maybe we incorporate that where the invest page, maybe that becomes infrastructure opportunity. Okay.
Yes, that's there, and there it is, right?
Yep.
So the public infrastructure part, we need to make sure that it's accurate. And Jim, I'm assuming that you've already looked at this and that you're satisfied with what it says. That it says what a developer would want it to say, that it highlights the right things.
I believe so, but I think what I'm gonna do, based on what you just said, is I can send Carol some text regarding the West Side Avenue project and what its benefits were. And just kind of make sure that that's accurate.
And Jim, as you guys go through this, I think this works out really well that we can even incorporate the invest and the benefits because so much of what lives on those 2 pages. Oh, there's a Meet Jody Bliss on that page, and I don't know why it's crossed out. So these pages are resources where there's, what kind of information you can get to and whatever else. So I'll take a look at these 2 pages, Jim, and incorporate what you put in. And I can even reach out to Lisa Bachman and team to talk about what the WAP accomplished, see if she has any images and things like that, so that we can create this as a more robust resource page and maybe even shift what it looks like. So that makes some sense. Contact. And again, some of these pictures are from before and some are newer. So this is the contact to Jim. This is where we would put the board pictures, terms. We won't include contact information for you unless you would like us to have it. Jim would be the point of contact, but people would know who you are and that they can, work with you to ask questions. Add board to contact. And then this last page that we go to goes back to the city page. So it's where they can find minutes, agenda, meeting, link to the Zoom meeting. So this is really for somebody who wants to engage with the board as itself. So I know I really raced through all that and you guys have given me good feedback about what you think is missing or could be improved. Other thoughts of things that we should include? Sorry. Yeah.
I just have one thought about maybe expanding a little bit on the fact that the Creek Walk Trail is in there. It's not really featured in there, but between that and the shuttle stop and fields and the connections that you can make on Becker's Lane and at the other end at the plaza.
Okay.
I don't know if you need to talk about it, but maybe some visuals
Okay.
that's there.
Okay. And those I think will be good. They're milestone, but they're really more amenities, right? Connectivity. They're kind of what Barb referred to as more the workhorse piece of it. That is the stuff that people notice when it's not there, but they don't notice when it is. Okay. Nope. I think that totally makes sense.
Alan has a comment.
Yes.
Yeah, another thing that might be useful if we could somehow figure out how to make the story is we're right there by the Garden of the Gods. And I mean, that's why I moved there. That's why I lived in this neighborhood for 40 years. It's a real amenity that we should be saying, hey, develop here and people have, it's a huge thing that we have to celebrate rather than ignore.
So from your perspective, do you see it living in imagery? Because we can actually take some images that show Manitou overlooking the garden or looking at it a different way. Or do you feel like actually calling out you're within minutes of Garden of the Gods?
Yeah, you're within within a half mile of a park that gets over 1 million visitors a year.
Okay. Okay, I can add that into copy and look at where we plug that in. So yeah, I think I can add it in both, but that helps me tremendously to talk about the accessibility for tourism business, for Manitou business, all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
The other new project is the city's purchase of the Dillon Motel. So putting that in as a project that's underway, not necessarily by the URA, but in the URA, much like the Holiday Inn Express.
That, yeah, and actually, is there someone on this board who, because one of the things I wanted to do is create that as part of one of our video interviews of somebody talking about the critical need for parking and having access to that. Is that come from council or would it come from somebody here that we could interview?
I think that needs to come from the city.
Yeah, Juan Alvarez is the contact person with the parking enterprise.
And I'm sorry, what was that name again?
Juan Alvarez.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, as we looked at replacing the videos, that was one of the most glaring, right? That the people that were there before at the Dillon had very different plans for it. So I can actually even walk down and knock on his desk.
He's very approachable.
Okay, good. Oh, okay. All right. Next week. Okay. No, this is all great information. And I think seeing it all in one space really reminds me of how far this has gone, you know, for improvement and such. It's a pretty big deal. So, well, that's all I have. If no one has any other questions or comments or suggestions, Jim, I can circle back with you. But like I said, we would love to take both group and individual pictures of everybody after the meeting, whatever works. So I'll pick this up and bring it back and shut it off. Thank you.
Can you put us back on the Zoom, please, so we can see Jim?
Oh,
Thank you.
well, let's see how that goes. Oh, also still not. There you go.
Thank you.
Good job.
Okay, Barb, you're up next to talk about the pollinator station update and the tree planting.
Okay, I'm not speaking to tree planting. Whose is that? Oh, okay. But on the pollination station, since I'm one of the volunteers, we're kind of restructuring because we've had certain volunteers that are willing to continue to participate and others that are not. We had kind of some coordination through Melody, but she's backed out of the picture. So amongst volunteers, we're kind of reorganizing ourselves. But I've had contact with Denise Howell, the city administrator, and she indicated the city would be willing to support us in securing our plants and things once we get organized with our planting date and that sort of thing and decide on our products that we want to put in. So I think we're coming together. I looked back on our calendar. Last year we planted, I think it was around June 11th or so. So we're in that window to get going. So we will tap for funds when we feel it's appropriate and barring any bumps in the road with anyone, but we're moving ahead. And I'm not sure who's speaking to trees.
Trees? Do we have a tree person here?
Or what that
We
was
do
about.
not. Jim, what's the tree?
I do, and I didn't know if Matt was gonna be there today or not. He had indicated he might be, but I can't see the audience, so I assume he's not there. So just a quick update. They are working right now doing plantings at the cemetery and the parks. Like 50 some trees to plant. They still, we're still on the docket, of course. And they plan on spending all $5,000 that we put in there for that. They may have to go to smaller trees because they may need to contract to get some of this stuff done. Apparently they've got a lot to do. But they're looking into that right now. They may have to go to container trees versus bald and burlap. I'm not sure that's a huge difference. They might be a little smaller. But that's kind of where they are right now. I don't have a specific time frame as to when they think they'll get there, but obviously as soon as they can.
Any questions for Barb or Jim about either of those topics? Okay, thank you. Let's move on, Jim, to an update on the MOU conversation with the council and your work with David and the city staff.
Sure. Well, I just got actually an email from Denise this morning saying that they actually need to push this back even further. It was going to be June to go to council again, but it looks like Jeff Parker can't make the meeting. So now she's looking at a time frame in July. I think it's like the first week in July to try to take it back to council. That said, if you all recall, the last time it went to city council, the reaction that it got was, this is too long, too complicated, take a lot out of it. And so Jeff Parker, the city attorney, took a stab at it and he really cut it down. We had a lot of whereas clauses, which, whereas clauses are fine. They give you a lot of kind of background as to what's happened and how the plan got approved and things like that. But Jeff took out a lot of those. There used to be 8, now there are 4, which are fine. It doesn't really lose anything by doing that. But he did reduce the entire document down from like 5 pages to 3. And there were a few things that I thought were lost. And we asked them to put back in, and so they have done so. A lot of things like they remove some of what the URA activities can be. The original document had in there, the URA will do public infrastructure like we have been doing, and as well as private investment. That all was kind of struck. So it doesn't say what activities we engage in, but it's still, the meat of it's still there to allow for the city to enter into an agreement. The cooperation agreement is kind of the meat of this as far as I'm concerned. And we asked, and David did do a red line version, send it back to them to put in the fact that the URA, once council approves funding for a specific project, we will enter into a cooperation agreement, which will spell out how the funding will be relied upon. Which is key for us and any other developers that we may work with. So that's currently back in there, but it was taken out, which was disturbing as far as I was concerned. And so David added that back in, and I think this is the version that is going to go to council at this point. And so I can read the paragraph that David put in, and that is underneath cooperation agreement, which is point number 5, the city will include such amount in the future budgets as applicable. The authority may rely on the cooperation agreement to commit sales tax increment revenue to a project. This will include entering into contracts with property owners and developers to provide funding for eligible expenditures. So I think that really does cover what I think we really wanted to see come out of this agreement. So this is the version, as far as I know right now, that will be going to council. But like I said, now it's not going to be until July.
Questions or
Any
comments?
questions?
Okay. Why don't you keep going and do your executive director report, please?
Sure. Okay. Well, like I said, we just went over the MOU. We've kind of gone back and forth with that a couple of times. I've been coordinating with Matt on the street trees. Carol, of course, with the webpage, it's been kind of a big one. We've been going back and forth on trying to get some of the old stuff out of there and new stuff. And I think Carol's done a commendable job so far with that. And then the LaFawn, we've been having some conversations with Fred Rollenhagen. Fred is the new city planning director. And so I've had a couple of Zoom calls between Fred and Rich Block and John Block about what the planning is right now for the LaFawn. You know, like we mentioned that currently it's probably going to be a housing project. But they keep pointing out that under the current zoning, they're going to need some variances to make it actually be a practical project that actually does have some return to it. The density issue, again, they brought that up, as well as the height limitations. And so, you know, Fred is now aware of that. Now we're concerned about, okay, what's the approach from this point forward into getting it to council and getting some kind of acknowledgement on this. The thought right now is to do some kind of a schematic concept plan of what they might be thinking, and then either discuss with the mayor and get his opinion on it, or Denise. We're not quite sure. Fred is trying to give us the best avenue on that, rather than go to full-blown development plan drawings and spend a lot of money. It would be good to feel out where the city is as far as supporting a project. How much of it can be affordable units? How much is going to be market rate units? That type of thing. So that's kind of where we are right now with the project. Any questions on that one?
Yes, Alan.
Yeah, you talked about the developers saying they need a reasonable return or something to do something. I'm a little confused. It's a 2-acre parcel. And I've seen a couple of projects recently in Manitou that were well within our old density, which was much lower than what we have now. What kind of return are they wanting? I mean, it's like right over the hill from me, there's a project that is closing up that it was well over 2 acres. They put in 12 duplexes and seem to have succeeded. There's another one on Becker's Lane, those townhouses. That was certainly within our density. What is it they're wanting? Are they, you know, I don't get the economics of this.
Well, and that's what we need to see yet, Alan. But basically, it comes down to, if you want to include affordable units in there, then they're going to need to have a lot more units to try to make it happen. But I don't have specifics at this point, but they're pretty concerned that, you know, between the cost of the land, the demolition costs that we paid for, you know, they
And
need
we
to
paid
be
for the land too, by the way.
part of it. Yeah. But we have to see what the return on investment is, and they need to provide us with that information at some point.
Thanks.
Jim, question, are they looking at any mixed use component or is it purely residential?
Well, that's another dilemma, John, as you're well aware of. You know, ideally what everybody would like, and I think they would too, is if you could put ground floor retail in. However, that compounds the height problem, because of course, you know, and of course the density. So it makes it more difficult to try to do that and yet get the density and the height limitations, because of course retail ground floor is higher. The floor plate on the retail is higher than just residential. So it may just end up being a residential project.
Any other questions or comments?
I'll just say this, for what it's worth, I did some investigation about the Barker House. The height is 4 stories. I don't know the foot height, but it's 4 stories and the density is 126 units per acre. And I don't think anybody objects to that building. except for possibly parking, which it's probably inadequate in terms of parking. But to me, density is just a number, and what's more important is bulk and scale and the use. And frankly, if we're going to be a community that supports affordable housing, then we have to provide some sort of incentive to have that happen, because it won't happen otherwise.
And the fastest way to get there is increased density, I would presume, right?
And I've done residential projects for years, and to me, the highest density in terms of actual use of the land is townhouses. Townhouses that have a parking garage, because the bulk and the scale and the land coverage is higher than you would normally find in most other projects.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, the Barker House was a repurposed hotel. So the density comparison, I think, is fairly unrealistic. And height is a different, we have a different streetscape. Everything in the downtown area is different. The max height is significantly higher. And as far as density, I spent a lot of time up in Denver, and somehow they're able to do affordable townhouses without going to more than 40 units, 25 units per acre. So sometimes I get the feeling that we're being pushed to do more and more and more just because some developer wants to make as much as they can, or have as high and as intense a project as they want. I don't think many people in Manitou are really wanting to have something like what we're seeing in Colorado Springs. There's even pushback now in Colorado Springs about height and what it does to the vibe of the community and existing residents. And it just seems like there has to be some compromise somewhere it doesn't completely obliterate the values of the community.
That's a really good point, Alan. And I think the issue right now for me is that it's tough for me to navigate or even give informal advice to the Paragon folks about what their next step should be when we're talking about a lot of what if scenarios. And the fact of the matter is, this is a development group that doesn't want to spend a whole bunch of money to do a full-blown development plan without having some understanding about what that community tolerance would be for various scenarios. So what they're trying to figure out is, how do we present concepts that would make us money and serve your need for affordable housing and perhaps even make it a mixed use project, right? A project that has retail and housing on it. How do we bring that forward to the community and get that sense without investing a whole bunch of money? And if you have any words of wisdom about that, that would be really helpful, because this is a difficult one. That it's already a fraught project politically, and we all know that. But it still is one with great potential and opportunity. So if you were to advise them, what would you say the next step would be for them?
I think at least for the near future, I don't sense that there's going to be a significant change in heights, density. Maybe I think on the margins, with the right affordable component, there would be. And I don't know if there's any way to do a back of the napkin in concept that you could just bounce across for people to look at. But there's got to be some room for discussion, I think.
Okay. Thanks. That's helpful. I think that's pretty much what Jim and I have been telling them is without the affordable housing component, a significant affordable housing component, you can't even talk about many variances, if any variances. And that's what I'm hearing you say. Any other comments? Jim, was that the extent of your report or do you have more to tell us?
No, I have one other item just to pass on because I'm sure everybody's interested. The Martin property is back on the market. And there's probably been about 4 potential buyers recently, all of which have backed out. And so it's back on the market. I talked to Jerry Trent, and he's trying to circle around back with some of the potential buyers to see, what's the magic number as far as what they'd be willing to pay for it. Apparently the remodeling costs and demolition costs are killing people on that, trying to keep that building. So anyhow, just a FYI, there's nothing solid on that right now.
Thanks. Okay, let's move on to the affordable housing report. This is from John and me, and Nancy participated as well. So we met a few weeks ago with Allison Gerbig, who is part of the Housing Advisory Board for Manitou Springs, and Nancy and John. We all met to talk about where the URA is at, what we do, where the Housing Advisory Board is at, what they're doing, and how they're working on implementation of the Proposition 123 plan as put forth in the, I guess, resolution or action by the city, the Manitou Springs Council. So the Housing Advisory Board is in the exploratory phase of their work, so they haven't done anything specific yet. Allison really just wanted to listen to what it is that we do and where we thought there were opportunities within the URA to develop affordable housing. We talked extensively about the Paragon property, the old La Fun Motel, and we talked about other potential areas along the avenue within the URA that could become affordable housing projects. And pretty much left it at that. We all had a few things that we were going to do, but the biggest item was that Allison was going back to the Housing Advisory Board to talk to them about our desire and willingness to work together to try to find sites and promote affordable housing along the corridor. And that's it. And Nancy and John, I'll let you give additional comments.
Well, we actually talked about more properties other than properties that were in the URA. And so we mentioned the cabins property, the Santa Fe Motel conversion to affordable housing. And just by coincidence, my wife Virginia found an article about a conversion that occurred in Durango, and it's not clear from that article how that was financed, but it was definitely some public money involved in that. And that's a community that does not have any ability to provide affordable housing on the open market. So they somehow managed to come up with a project where they converted a motel and actually added units on the property. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but anyhow, we have some dated motels in this community that may be appropriate for conversion. And Debbie passed that information on to the housing group. I haven't mentioned that the Martin property has residential units. They could be, there's 2 now, there could be 3 or 4, I suppose, if somebody reworked it in conjunction with a retail use. And, without a user, you can't really have that discussion, but at least they have that information.
I mean,
Yeah, Alan.
I may be mistaken, but isn't it gonna be kind of a precursor for us and for anybody to go ahead to get this MOU understood, so everybody understands where they are between the city and the URA?
We don't have to have it in order to continue operating, but we do have to have it in court in order for the city to pledge sales tax revenue to any project for the future. That's where we're really stuck.
Yeah, I think, well, my point is that the developers, any prospective developer and the URA and the city are gonna have to understand what money comes from which pot and how reliable is that?
Absolutely.
Because right now we're just drifting.
Yeah, exactly. And which is why affordable housing projects make more sense, because then we're talking about property tax generation, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
just
Alan.
clarification, with our existing relationship with the city, if we came up with a scenario for a sales tax increment type financing, don't we still have the mechanism where the city council could agree to it? And that, that was a step that got missed with the Holiday Inn that possibly could make it work even without an updated MOU.
Yes, absolutely. We always have that opportunity. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I had one other question for John. You mentioned the Santa Fe. And in terms of that, it would be a tear down or just repurposing? Because right now I know they do have a conditional use for long-term residential. I don't know how it's working, but
Well, I wasn't aware of that. I know that the property is not in very good shape
Yeah.
and I don't know if the current status, if there's permitted residential use there now, then there's probably not an opportunity to move forward, but and I don't see much opportunity to increase the number of units on that property either. So if that's already the ultimate use of the property, I guess nothing will happen there.
well, I don't know. It could be upgraded. I look at, I think about somewhere in the last 15 years, we approved long-term residency in the Western Cabins and in the Santa Fe. And I know the Western Cabins it really is a pretty decent, affordable area. And since the with management, but somehow I guess things have kind of gone the other way with Santa Fe. But they both were approved with conditions. And this is before we had a long-term housing ordinance. We just went through the major conditional use process and they were both allowed that. It just looks like it's gone on rough times and maybe it's more maintenance or older buildings or worse conditions in Santa Fe.
Well, I don't know the specifics of it, but I mean, all of us are homeowners. If you don't maintain your property and do upgrades periodically, it goes downhill. And that's what's happened, in my opinion, at the Santa Fe. And unless there's a financial incentive to upgrade, it won't happen. They're at a baseline where they can continue and the property will probably continue to deteriorate unless there's some financial reason for them to reinvest in that property. And that's the problem we have with a number of properties.
Any other comments or questions? We'll keep you posted about the Housing Advisory Board and how things progress. Manitou Avenue lighting levels. Jim and Alan, I'm going to let you tee this up while Bill, you are welcome to come join us up here at the table. So Jim, you want to go ahead and tell us the status of this issue, where we're at right now and what Bill is going to present to us today?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so this is a follow-up to the last board meeting. You all discussed what are the possibilities of either reducing the lighting level or leaving them the same. And I think the direction I got was, let's reach out to CSU and have Bill come and talk about just what options there are for changing the lighting or not. But so I reached out to Bill, and that's why he's here this morning. So really, he just wants to talk about what options there are and kind of get your feedback, and then we'll just kind of go from there.
Thank you. Bill, welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Bill Balch. I'm the project manager for Colorado Springs Utilities in the city of Manitou Springs. And so I appreciate the opportunity to come in today to visit with you, kind of lay out what our goals are, try to hear what y'all's goals are and see what we can figure out. We have an extensive collaborative effort between Manitou Springs and utilities with so much infrastructure underground, so many opportunities, utilities underground. Sure. Is that better? And so we just want to continue that collaborative effort. I understand that y'all have passed a dark skies ordinance in the last year or so. I am leading the negotiations with Denise, the mayor, the council, and those folks about the renewal of a franchise agreement. We have a current 20-year franchise agreement that provides for utilities to provide electric and gas service to the city of Manitou Springs. That agreement expires in July. We're in the final stages of negotiating. I think we have an agreement in principle with your leadership and city attorney and our leadership and city attorney, and we're just going through that process. But included in there, we talk about, while streetlights aren't specifically included, they are included for purposes such as beautification projects that we've done along Manitou Avenue, for example, to underground the overhead infrastructure that we did all the way up, as you discussed earlier, the western part of Manitou Avenue. We've had discussions as far as your Creek Trail project that you want to do. I think it may be phase 4 up on the western end as far as undergrounding utilities. So we have an extensive history, and we want to keep that history of a good working relationship and coming and figuring out how we're going to do these things. Not sure I have any, there's certainly not any silver bullet or any specific answers to address regarding street lighting. I have Jason Reed with me, who is the supervisor, currently the supervisor over our street lighting group. So if we get into specifics, I can make something up or we can get an answer from Jason. So, but I appreciate the opportunity. We have roughly about 800 streetlights within the city of Manitou Springs. Approximately 100 of them are owned by the city of Manitou Springs and operated and maintained by utilities. The other 700 or so are owned, operated, and maintained by Colorado Springs Utilities. They're the standard, what you would see is the standard stainless steel Cobra head style. We have somewhere between 35 and 40,000 of those within Colorado Springs, and then the 800 or so that are here. As part of the undergrounding process going along and the beautification efforts that we've collaborated with the city on along Manitou Avenue, decision was made to install what we call decorative street lights, the green ones, the pretty green ones. And so those are paid for at 100% by the city of Manitou Springs, and you own those, but we still maintain and operate those. So as things have changed, everybody's noted, we've gone from high pressure sodium bulbs, for example, or different types of bulbs and different types of fixtures in various parts around the community. We're kind of going to a little more standardized on LEDs. Kind of depends on the application. There are safety concerns, insurance concerns, you know, those things that we want to address, but fundamentally we use a basic LED type of wattage within those bulbs. We do have some ability, and Jason may throw something at me here, but We do have some ability to put up some shielding to direct the lights away, maybe from houses, somebody's bedroom or something like that. But fundamentally, that's pretty much as we just maintain and the bulbs, replace the bulbs. And as we participate in city projects, we go with the decorative fixtures. So that's kind of an overview of where we are. I'd like to hear more from y'all as far as what your hopes and expectations are, or any other questions I could answer. By all means, let me know. I've had conversations with Jim. You know, this is going to be an ongoing process, and we're certainly happy to come and visit and discuss this and figure out how we can make this work for everybody.
Alan, you want to?
Yeah, I'm probably I'm the one that brought this up and you know, and there's mixed feelings throughout the city. There's a lot of feeling that I've heard that there's too much light. And is there any way to moderate it without, you know, losing the safety aspect? You know, is it, you know, having less intense bulbs or filters or turning off some of the lights if we find we have too much? But, you know, the sense a lot of people have is like they're, you know, they're like on a airplane runway or a prison yard. And it seems like there, you know, there's some interest in dialing it down. And I just am curious about options that, you know, you mentioned filters or directing light, and I know it's a little more challenging with the LED lights. It's just more a question like, what would be some approaches to reducing the intensity? I mean, it would be turning off some of the lights. So would that even be possible without massive expenditures? Is it, you know, flipping a switch, stuff like that?
Sure. No, those are all great questions. You know, we've come a long way. Likes, dislikes have changed over the years. And so the number of streetlights that were here 50 years ago don't necessarily have to be the same number of streetlights that are within the city now. That I think that's a city choice. We're here to support the city and what the city's goals are, while also being mindful that there are safety considerations. CDOT does have certain requirements as to the intensity, location of streetlights along county and state highways. For example, Manitou Avenue, I believe, is a state highway designation. But as far as your question is concerned, let me point you to the Becker's Bridge rehabilitation. We went back in, that bridge was rebuilt, and we participated in that construction. We undergrounded our overhead electric infrastructure, replaced street lights, installed street lights, and put up the new decorative street lights. And then I get a call from the mayor saying, you know, we need to talk. Those are awfully bright. Yet the short answer is yes, we can make adjustments as to the light level within certain constraints, depending upon the type of fixture, the type of bulb that's in there. But we have a lot of flexibility, a lot of opportunities and things in our quiver that we can do to address those. I just want to say there are certain safety standards. There may be certain insurance standards. You know, they always ask how close, when you get homeowners insurance, how close are you to a fire hydrant, for example? They may or may not want to know, is there a street light nearby? If so, how bright is it, or how dim is it, or things like that. So we want to make sure we don't just rush in there and start ripping out street lights and then have there be consequences, unintended consequences. So that's a long-winded way to say we're happy to work with you as we go along to get where the city wants to be.
Well, you know, you brought up Becker's, and there other than on the bridge, there are those shepherd crook.
The Cobra heads,
No, is that what they're called? The
stainless steel.
yeah. Well, not on the big poles, not the CSU ones, you know, the decorative ones.
The green ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are
And
decorative.
is something like that appropriate for a state highway, or is that?
Sure.
So that would be a possibility to, if we somehow went to something like that.
Well, that's what we've got as part of the beautification process, all the way up from the arch,
Yeah.
essentially. Going over that bridge, you turn right, you go over to Becker's. The city of Manitou Springs decided that y'all wanted the decorative streetlights there. And so, sure, I mean, it's not as much what the fixture looks like. It's the state's interested in what the lumens and the light.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
light
So
source
like
things.
the ones along Becker's, the Cobras, that fixture, would the ones along the avenue would it be even possible to convert those without, I mean, just changing the fixture on top without ripping out the whole pole?
Well, we can install LEDs using, again, Jason may throw something at me, depending upon the type of fixture that's there. Typically, when we switch out from, say, a high pressure sodium or some other older traditional light source to an LED, it requires a fixture change also, but you maintain the same type of pole and the Cobra head look and everything like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, my understanding is a Cobra head lights up the area
Mhm.
as well as what do you call the ones that,
The decoratives.
the ones that
decorative
are,
green ones with the little lantern look on the top.
they just basically radiate out 360 degrees and all, you know,
Yes.
so it could be as safe to have the Cobra rather than that.
I would say we could probably make both of them equally safe, yes.
Okay.
If you'll look, sometimes they have to be spaced closer together, depending upon the height of the pole. Right? To get the kind of coverage, but again, these are coverages that go back decades, and now likes and dislikes have changed, desires have changed, and so we can make adjustments to get you there. So frequently, depending upon the height of the pole, we may have more streetlights than would have typically been there with the old Cobra head
Okay.
type of lights. So
When I joined the group, I think there was early discussion on the new lighting that we're discussing, the decorative lighting, that the poles were quite tall. Is there any options that relate to shortening the height and maintaining the same kind of lighting in those particular poles? They're extremely tall.
fundamentally, the shorter the pole, the closer the lights have to be together. The higher you go, the more the light spreads. The shorter you go, the less.
So I mean,
coverage
is
you
there
get.
any option as to analysis of the run of lights that we have up and down that section? If the poles were lessened in height, if we would lose or diminish the lighting capacity?
You will get less coverage if you use shorter poles. So you would need more poles to get the same amount of coverage.
And my understanding is that as part of the West Side Avenue project, this board decided to invest in double the number of poles
Okay.
that were required to
Question.
meet the minimum standard for the state
Okay.
highway. So we already have twice the number of poles than we need on our stretch from the arch to Highway 24. So coverage isn't an issue for us. The issue is the brightness of the light.
Right.
Well, that was
And-
my question
yeah.
about whether we lessen the height, does it diminish the coverage?
Yes.
And that's your
And it
answer to that.
would.
And those lights extend past the arch to the east too,
Yes, they do.
Down a
but
little
into
not the
Colorado
same
Springs
Down a little
side.
bit.
Okay.
Mhm.
Spacing, right.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
goes back to the minimum spacing required.
And so are
when you
those
go
spaced
east.
similarly?
No,
they're
they're
not.
separated
They're further
significantly more.
apart.
Yeah.
So what was the difference? Well, then-
Manitou Springs preference.
Okay, so that wasn't a mandated
No,
issue.
no,
That was a
our,
decided issue.
Yes.
And
yes.
so in some respect, I think in that regard, other than if there's some way to modify intensity to still meet safety requirements or CDOT requirements, we live with what we have.
Yeah.
Alan and Farley.
Yeah, when we did that, that was basically a design decision that the URA board approved and then worked out and paid for the funding, the increase in costs that it was going to take to do that vis-a-vis the normal CSU lighting. I've got a somewhat separate question are our lights now owned by Manitou?
Yes, they are, but maintained by Colorado Springs
Yeah,
Utility.
do we have a say in this?
I think Jim and I talked about this the other day.
I mean,
I
I hate
think
to make,
No, what I think what we have the ability to do is to make a recommendation to the city that this change be made.
Okay,
What
got
if
it.
we would expect, if we would want a change to be made, and that we would have to make the investment in whatever that change would cost. That's my belief at the moment, that that's the
Okay.
way we'd have to proceed here.
then I don't think so.
If we wanted to make, if we wanted to make a change, I think the expectation would be we would invest in the change. I think that
If
would be the expectation.
Yeah,
Yes,
Farley
there you
says
go.
that may be the expectation. That just reiterates that we need to get that MOU in place.
Yeah. Yeah, just from conversations I've had, I think there are a lot of people in the city that would welcome the change regardless of who put up the money. And, you know, it's more like I could have started this conversation with council and they could have gone ahead, but there's a feeling here that don't just go do things without involving us. And that's why I started here.
Got it.
Because I think, you know, there's plenty of interest throughout the community and we don't have to be so siloed that we can't work together even without an MOU. And that's just my opinion from talking to people.
Thank you. Farley?
Yes, I just have a quick question. I'm not advocating for this necessarily. I just want to ask the question. The current poles in the URA, if we were to take down every other pole, are they in any way obsolete? Could they possibly be repurposed in other areas in Manitou?
I'll have to jump in here. If I say something that's gonna get you in trouble, Jason, but the short answer is, if that is the desire of the city of Manitou Springs, then we would work with you to make that happen. Yes. Could they be repurposed if they're the green decorative style? We keep a bunch of those in stock because that's Manitou Springs choice for type of streetlights whenever there's work being done. We also use them downtown Colorado Springs. So those are the same types of fixtures. So to answer your question, they might be able to be repurposed. We seem to replace. They seem to be, people aim for them. And so they seem to be, I would guess we replace 4 or 5 a year-ish. But we keep them in stock because we utilize them in downtown Colorado Springs as well. So I think the answer to your question is we would certainly make every effort to do that and to repurpose them. Yes.
John?
Well, I'm going to ask a different question, I guess. If I don't see us recommending that we remove any of the poles. So if the interest is to decrease the intensity of light, is that possible without changing the fixture by sending more less electricity to those? Or do you have to actually change the fixture in order the bulb in order for that to happen?
Like on Becker's, you can turn them down if you will. They do have dimmer switches, for
Okay.
lack of a better term. There is a limitation as to
Mhm.
how much you can turn them down.
Understand that. I just-
So we can
But
turn
you
them.
could be, but that would be a cost to the city, is that correct?
It's, yes,
And can you give me a ballpark of what that cost might be? Just
$7 or
curious.
$8 million. See, I threw out a high number that way when I come in with a reasonable number. You want to give them a guess?
We'd have to go back and just kind of see how many lights there are and what it would take to do
Mhm.
And realistically, if it doesn't get down to it, we'd have to go look and see if there's like a lower, like a dimmer one, per se, so less lumens, so a different water. We'd have to, really have to see what there is.
I tried to protect you from this, but we'd certainly work with you to see what we could do, yes.
So realistically, like we'd have to go back and look and see what kind of light it is. I don't know the exact lumens of what it puts off, but we could see if there's another one that maybe has less lumens and just see what that takes and cost wise and see how much we can really turn it down and see if it's worth coming out and doing it. Like I'd want to get to know all that before we just say, yes, let's do it. You know what I mean? So we could have good answers for you guys.
I mean, we could turn them all the way down. There's a cost for going out there, having crews go out there and making those adjustments.
Mhm.
And then you could see if you like it or not. And then if you don't like it, then we sit there and we look like Jason is talking about and seeing what are other alternatives for doing that. Maybe it's removing every other street light. Maybe it's something else. It's kind of like, we'll do whatever you want us to do. There may be costs associated, or there will be costs associated with that. And we just want to make sure we're mindful of the insurance and safety considerations.
The one thing I will say about removing every other street light is once we pull that light, there's still those wires.
Still a big.
So there's still gonna be a hazard. There's gonna be something that somebody could break into, get into those wires, and me personally, I would not want to do that. That's just my personal take, but again, we're, like he said, we'll do whatever you guys want us to do realistically.
Well, here's my personal take. Number one, there was a design decision made years ago that, number one, that we wanted to look different in the URA and the Manitou Springs, and I think we ought to honor that. So I say my opinion is the poles should stay the way they are. The second part of this is it's a community decision is whether or not there's too much light. And there's also a safety concern. And I guess my personal feeling is that they're too bright. But that being said, I like them bright during the Christmas season when we have the decorations. So from a board standpoint, I think our position ought to be that this is really a city position, and if citywide we need to reduce the amount of light, I mean, I'm fine with that. I built the first house in our subdivision. The city engineer came around and said, okay, you've occupied a house, we have to put a street light in. And I said, we don't want it. We want dark skies. And so we don't have a street light. And I made that decision because I was the first resident, so nobody else got to have any input. So they put wall pack lights on their homes if they wanted to get brightness, and that's okay. That's their choice. So I'm an advocate of less light, but I'm also an advocate of public safety, and I'm also an advocate of the keeping the design that we have in place.
Just a question about the notion of turning it down. You know, you said someone would have to come out and do that, and that would be like a pole to pole, like a few minutes, a few hours, a day of effort. I mean, just trying to get a sense. I know it wouldn't be 7 million. I really don't buy that number, but would it be, in the, under 10K, over 10K? I mean, under 5, any kind of sense of.
We'd probably have to go back and count and see how many exact lights we're talking about and see exactly. I can't imagine it taking a long time, but to get that number better, we really need to go back and get a count and just see what it would take. But
yeah, absolutely. We don't want to give you a bad number. Yeah, I was just kidding with the 6 or 7 to prepare you for a lesser number, but I'm trying to remember when we dimmed the lights on Becker's. I don't want to lie to you. I'm thinking like $1,200 or $1,500 for the whole thing, but Don't quote
Okay.
me on that.
So to get that number or get a sense, is that like a formal request from the city to go out and then you'll go out and
Mhm.
give us a report? Great, thank you.
Sure. Like I say, we've been having these conversations off and on for a long time because we have a lot of things that we do together. Or somebody hits a light or something like that. We when Becker's was redone, we installed the standard lighting. The city comes back and says, can we turn those down? Our goal is to work with you to get you what you want. Sounds like this whole dark skies conversation, I won't claim to understand what that means or what we as a utility have to help you with to help you be compliant, but as long as we can communicate about it. I'm up here several times a week and I have multiple conversations with your city engineers and Denise and people. So we're happy to work with you however we can.
Now, just one last question. If we did, decide to try this, to dial it down, it would be something that could be dialed back up if it's not like we're not doing any permanent modifications that would. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I'm new to this position, so I'll have to get I want to not tell you lies, so I want to get the right answer and then we can come back and give you that for sure.
Absolutely.
Other questions for Bill or Jason? Oh, you knew that was coming. Jim has a question. Jim, you're muted.
Just a quick question. So on an order of magnitude, Jason, do you have an idea how much you could reduce the light level by the dimmer?
I don't want to lie to you, so I would like to get that answer and then get back with you guys for sure. I don't want to make up a number and it be totally off. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Other questions?
But if you decide to do that, just, we'll hear from your city engineer or Denise or somebody, if we get that request, we'll take a look at it and we'll tell you what we find out.
And would that be an all or nothing kind of approach? Would it affect all the lighting or just selective areas? I mean,
Just the lights that.
in
were
a certain area
Specifically, each light
It
is
can be done
independently.
by a zone.
Yeah, there's not a
Okay.
dimmer switch on a wall where you can turn down that affects. You have to do it at each individual fixture.
Okay, so the cost associated is the number of lights you're addressing in what, what area. And it doesn't affect any load of the run in its entirety at all. That
It
we're
shouldn't.
affecting the city in
Right.
total in any
Yeah,
way.
no, it
Okay.
shouldn't.
Okay, what would you like to do?
I think if there's interest in this, it's a city issue. I really don't think it's our issue. And I think if there's an interest, as Bill said, Denise ought to make the request.
Okay,
We don't
I
own it,
agree.
the city does. All we did was help pay for it.
And do you think we should at least ask the city, just stay out of it, say, and just someone independently go to the city and say, look into it?
I think it's up to them. I mean, if there's this groundswell of opinion that it's too bright and the city thinks they want to look at alternatives, they ought to officially ask utilities, as Bill said, to do that.
Okay.
I don't think it's us. I think I said that last time.
Yeah, you did. I just clarify.
John?
I make a motion that we do nothing.
I'll second.
Alan seconding. May I amend your motion just in all seriousness? I would say when the design decision was made, it was clearly a decision for the URA URA to make. Now that we have lights and we're all living with them, clearly there's an impact, a consequence beyond the URA to the lights, right? Because it's mostly Allen's neighborhood that is saying it's too bright, like it's affecting our ambient light at night in our neighborhood. So now it is a citywide issue. And it's not one that we can resolve. It's one that we could invest in if we chose to. But I don't think we could resolve what do we do with safety versus what do we do about dark skies versus what do we do about the cost of all this, right? This is way beyond us. So I would amend the we do nothing motion to say, we're not taking a position because this is now a community-wide issue and not one that where we should be deciding or recommending or doing anything in particular. I would also say that this is exactly the kind of public discussion that where I get confused about how the city does hold the public discussion. What does community input look like for issues like this? How do these kinds of things get raised and decided and communicated across the community? It just continues to stump me how we do that well. So I'm just going to say that.
I accept the amendment.
Do you want to take an official vote or can we leave it at that? Will that satisfy you, Alan, that you should move
Yeah,
forward
you know,
with your issue?
the only reason I brought it up, and I have a couple more issues to bring up later on, but there's sensitivity, there was disappointment, there was hurt feelings when the city acquired the Martin property without talking to the URA, when the city acquired the Dillon without talking to the URA, and concerns about how the city's going to deal with the Dillon property. So that's why I started here. I'm perfectly happy. I have good relationships with everybody on council, and I'll be happy to ask them if they want to go ahead with it, because it certainly is not my right to talk to the city administrator and director to do anything other than ask her questions. So I will ask my representatives on council to think about it. If they want to do something, they will. But I'm perfectly fine just to leave it now. I just thought it would be playing nice by starting here and not hurting feelings.
Well, and Alan, thank you for bringing it up. I think this was a good discussion, and it's the kind of discussion that ought to happen more often in Manitou Springs about policy issues.
Yeah, I especially appreciate it because the extent of the safety issue, I don't think gets raised enough. And we've certainly had good conversations around this table in the last, couple of years about how big the safety issues really are, and that is what drove the decision to light the avenue the way it is lit today. So it's not as though it was a mistake that anyone made. This was very intentional with a very good reasoning behind it. So if there's a modification to be made, I really hope that the council and the city administration takes that into account because it's really important. Okay, anything else about that topic? All right, moving on. Nancy's report.
I don't have a lot today because council hasn't met in the past 3 weeks, so it's been a lovely vacation. Tonight's agenda should be interesting. We will be looking at the CSU franchise agreement in executive session. So you guys won't be privy to it, but hopefully we'll finalize that pretty much this evening. Also, what is now public is that the contract to purchase the property adjacent to the Dillon Motel for $650,000, which is more than twice what the appraisal came in as. So interesting. Car wash property. Yeah. So anyway, that'll be finalized tonight in all likelihood. Back to the affordable housing slightly. Jill Gabler came and spoke to Kiwanis last night. She is the director of the Pikes Peak Housing Network. And she's a great point of contact for data and advocacy, policy, et cetera, et cetera. And she made some really excellent points last night, show another great resource for when it comes to affordable housing. We did talk with Debbie and John about the Toby Gannett. Does anyone know him? He's a developer. Yeah.
Yes.
And he also came to council or to Kiwanis and spoke to them. So there is, I haven't figured out quite who is advocating for affordable housing in Kiwanis, but I do know that there seems to be increased interest in it. So that's a good thing. And that's pretty much all that I have for now. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Nancy, clarify a little bit more of that last part. Where Toby, what was he speaking to?
He came to, I was not able to go to the night he presented at Kiwanis.
Oh, at Kiwanis. okay.
Yes, but then the mayor, because the mayor is part of Kiwanis, and so he invited him to meet with some myself and David Armstrong from the Planning Commission. Alan was not able to attend that morning that he came, and we had probably an hour and a half discussion with him about how he puts financial packets together, and it was remained very challenging. It's just an incredibly challenging effort to put these very complex financial packets together to accomplish affordable housing, or any housing actually, but certainly affordable housing.
So that speaks also to our discussion earlier about Paragon.
Yes, big time. That's, yeah.
Is Toby still pursuing senior housing? Or is he not expressing a preference?
In terms of where downtown, he primarily works in Colorado Springs.
Yes,
He is hesitant to work in Manitou Springs because it is so difficult to work here
yes.
for any developer. So he has offered his assistance that if we come up with some land and, could work with our land use code, et cetera, that he would love to come and work in Manitou. And he's done some really remarkable projects in Colorado Springs. Very exciting to show what the possibilities are. So
His first project was a senior living project, but
Okay.
that was a long time ago. Yeah. Okay,
anyway, one of the bottom lines of our discussion with him is that we need more people like him who understand all these processes. And he goes, there just aren't any. I mean, he's a unicorn somewhat in that
he
regard.
definitely is.
Yeah.
But we also need more people like him who are willing to invest in our communities, even though it's hard, and want to stay here, make their home here.
Right.
And
right.
not just make money here, to Alan's point. And that's
Yeah.
unicornish too.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so he's a great resource, and I do have his contact information. I've been in contact with him a couple times. So thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for Nancy? All right, other business. Yes, Alan.
I have a couple of things. First of all, there's been a lot of discussion about transit, a lot of briefings that council has had recently. And one of the things that was noted in one of their briefings was that the transit stops are the community's responsibility. So someone asked me like, hey, we've got that one by where Lulu's was, and it's not covered. It's kind of harsh in the summer and the winter. Would that be a project that the URA would be interested in taking on to, we're not talking hundreds of thousands. We're talking, certainly less than what we gave for a roof upgrade recently to do that. And it can also just originate from the city, but since someone asked me about it and asked what our involvement could be, I just thought I'd bring it up here for if anyone wants to weigh in on that.
I believe those are city projects in particular on bus shelters. in terms of the city contracting and funding for the bus service.
We did invest in upgraded bus benches a number of years ago, as I recall.
I
Or
think,
at least we were weighing in on what they should look like. I remember us having a bus bench conversation. Maybe it was just what they looked like, what kind of style we wanted along the avenue, something like that.
I think
We
that
didn't
stop,
invest.
by our planters there by Lulu's is very unattractive. But I think what it got away from was when they used to put advertising on the bus benches. And I don't know even if that could be encouraged more as an artistic project to improve the looks of those and not look like some of those ratty benches that are scattered around, not only here, but Colorado Springs. But I did see a couple of those nicer shelters, which they put advertising in. I did see a couple of those yesterday driving around that actually the wind took out.
Yeah.
So they're very weather prone and they're very graffiti prone as well, but that's why they try to finish them the way they do with the plasticized sides, but they do get damaged as well. But I agree, some nice benches perhaps could be considered for, they're several $100s a piece if you put new seating in.
Yeah, well, I think the feedback I got was more that, like if it's raining, if it's in the middle of summer and it's hot, there's no shade. If it's, windy and snowy, there's nothing. There's other places where they are at least some kind of shelter, and that was the interest in, because we're trying to encourage use of transit and would make it more inviting.
Any interest in pursuing that as a URA project?
I have a question associated for Nancy. If on the other property that's being considered for purchase next to the Dillon, are there some plans for sheltering in that? Is that, well, let me back up. Is that additional parking lot space? Is that what that's planned for?
Plans have not been absolutely solidified, but the discussion has been around just expanding and making it a larger parking lot. Because it's immediately adjacent to the Dillon. So there are some challenges because CDOT, there's that barrier in the middle of the road. It's right next to 24, coming off of 24 there. There's a lot of challenges, but that's what the discussion has been to date, is about just expanding that parking lot.
But there was kind of a basic sketch or design, wasn't there, John, that you saw or somebody presented or looked at? Were they
Well,
having any sheltering
Oh,
associated?
they're
with
not,
parking?
there's no way that they're that far along in any discussions or
Wasn't there some
designs. So
sketches or something?
they're concentrating just on purchasing the property, and that,
Mhm.
and demolishing the Dillon has been as far as concrete decisions have occurred.
Well, I guess this is public knowledge since it was sent to me, but I asked if there were designs, and there are. There are concepts, which include the car wash property. So to answer your specific questions, I think it's being considered. I met with Juan Alvarez and I gave him a lot of my ideas. That's not public input in terms of community input. It's one individual. I've sent copies of pervious pavement examples that I recently saw in Texas, and provided that to planning staff so that they could investigate incorporating that into a parking lot. But there are a lot of opportunities there to do things that the land use code says we ought to be doing citywide, and whether those are employed or not, I don't know the answer to that. And to answer the specific question, there are no concrete plans. There are sketches that say this is what can happen. And I think the direction was, how do we maximize as much parking on these properties as you can?
Well, I was just, and I didn't mean to take it off track of Alan's question about a bus stop. But I would think all these kind of things intertwine, where you want some commonality of appearance when when the dust settles, literally, that we don't have a hodgepodge of different things popping up. So if there's a, a nice conceptual look of how that whole zone is going to look, that might extend itself to our little bus transit stops as well. So that was kind of where I was going with that inquiry.
I get a sense this is in the city's ballpark. Or,
I'm getting that sense as well.
okay. I'll move on to my next thing because I know everybody wants to go. There was a report, part of this DDA URA study. There's a memorandum of existing conditions, and I just had a question about one thing related to the URA that I'm not aware of and don't understand. And this is on page 8 of this report. It says there are 3 capital improvement projects under consideration for future development, pending the availability of funding. First is improvements to the Highway 24 and Manitou Avenue interchange. A second project would build an additional pedestrian crossing across Fountain Creek, etc. And a third would involve a joint project with the School District 14 for an extension of streetscape improvements adjacent to the middle school. So that's the one I've never heard of this, and I don't understand how our jurisdiction would go that far.
It doesn't, but Farley has a comment. Farley?
No, I just, I believe they have been corrected. They just misunderstood the boundaries of the URA, so they thought that that was a URA project.
Great,
But
thanks.
I'm pretty sure the consultants now know.
Okay.
Well, and we did have a project on the north side of the baseball field.
On El Paso.
That was going to be a joint project with School District 14 to improve the streetscape.
And that
That's
was,
the project.
that was the
So they
confusion
got
for them.
confused about.
Yeah,
okay.
about location.
Okay, yeah, because, someone asked me about that, like, what? That
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. Okay,
It was random.
yeah,
Because it stated the school
Yeah.
and they knew the school was down here. They didn't understand, so they thought it was a URA thing. They got those two things mixed up.
okay.
Good catch, actually,
yeah.
because that is confusing.
Yeah, and the final thing, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I've gotten a lot of negative comments about the grant we did last year for a roof, last month for the roof, and quotes like, "That's outrageous. Those people, us, should not be trusted with any taxpayer money. What are they thinking? This is an insult." And I think the concern is, like, if you look at what we even say in our grant site improvement thing, we say the program will assist with projects that add new or upgraded infrastructure resulting in increased business activity or providing housing opportunities within the urban renewal area. And the feedback is like, we say we don't have much money, and we just gave up to 25K to an 8,000 square foot, 1-person office. How is that going to do anything to increase economic activity in our zone? So I think the feedback is that we should be really cognizant of what we're doing when we give away money, because now we've pretty much set the precedent that if your roof is bad, the URA will fix it for you, or at least share the cost.
Thank you. Anything else? A motion to adjourn, please. Farley moves. And seconds. All those in favor say aye. We're adjourned. Thank you. Jim, thank you very much.
Could we, if we just do it next month, but can we intentionally make sure that Marcy's here? Somebody go pick her up. You are? Okay. Okay. Yes. Good.